Welcome to Sum of Your Parts podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Betsy Greenleaf, premier pelvic health expert and women's wellness warrior. Join me as we discuss women's health topics with top elite experts, and you'll discover that you're greater than the sum of your parts.
Hi, I'm Dr. Betsy Greenleaf, premier pelvic health expert and women's wellness warrior. I'm the host of Sum of Your Parts podcast. As you may already know, we're interrupting our normal scheduled podcasts to bring you a series on COVID-19 care, how to survive during our time of coronavirus and quarantine. I have specialists ranging from those to cover information about the virus to those on how to deal with communication, well-being, wellness, and mental health. So join me in listening to these over the next few days. Thank you. Stay well. Today we'll be talking with Dr. Sarah Rattray.
She's a clinical psychologist that has a successful practice in Washington State. She not only helps couples find out what's blocking them, but she helps them to gain the skills to build an incredible relationship and an incredible life. She is sought after on podcasts, medical summits, conferences, and she's one of the first and few clinical psychologists able to practice the Gottman therapy technique. Today we will be talking about calm communication, how to effectively communicate with partners, friends, family during times of stress, in particular with focusing on what's happening during the quarantine and the stress of coronavirus.
Great. So today I have with me Dr. Sarah Rattray. Thank you, Dr. Sarah, for being with us.
You're welcome, Betsy. Happy to be here. Good to talk to you again.
Yeah, so there's so much different stress that comes up on so many different levels with people being quarantined or just dealing with the uncertainty of the coronavirus and COVID-19. From your standpoint, what things can you recommend to help us all keep sane?
Yeah. Well, Betsy, I imagine other people that you've interviewed have been talking about stress in our bodies. And what I want to share is the way in which stress in our bodies can get in the way of communication with the people that we love and the people that we're living with.
Sure.
So when we are living right now in this time of unpredictability, and we're not in control of all the stress that's around us, our systems are on alert. We're in fight or flight. We're on alert for danger. We're vigilant. And what that means is when somebody talks to us or when we talk to somebody in a way that's surprising or startling, it just kind of re-sparks or re-triggers or perpetuates that that vigilance, that fight or flight within our bodies. And we want to do everything that we can to talk to the people around us in a calm and safe way.
And I agree. I've noticed that, I don't know if it's lucky or unlucky. My husband's still working. And for me, that's causing a lot of stress because he's going out of the house, but he's an essential worker. So, but I find that there have been a lot more being a little snippy with each other, like, hey, you're kissing the dog, which I know I'm not even supposed to be kissing the dog right now, but they're like, he's like, you're kissing the dog, but you're not even kissing me. And I'm like, well, you've been out in the world and I don't know what you're coming home with. And even though you're not around sick people, I don't know. And I'm like, don't want to be near you. So it does create some stress. And forget about if you have a family member that's working in the healthcare field, that makes it even more stressful and scary. So.
It is scary. And the words that you used, Betsy, you said snippy. You said you're snippy with each other, and that's what's happening everywhere, because you're not sitting there feeling relaxed and peaceful and calm, and he's not coming home feeling relaxed and peaceful and calm. So anything that each of you think or see or want to comment on, you're feeling stirred up about. And since you're feeling stirred up about it, it comes out in a snippy way instead of a calm way. And that can set off a cascade of irritation and fighting. And that's what I want to share with you about how we can avoid that escalation in snipping and fighting.
Yeah, because I'm sure that, every relationship already has underlying stressors, whether that's relationship stressors or financial, and for some people, the financial stressors are even worse now. And now you add this other layer of stress, and that's going to make the old issues almost even more like kind of ramped up. So, yeah. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Sorry.
No, I was going to say, I absolutely agree. What you're talking about, you're exactly right, Betsy. You're layering stress on top of stress. So you have an older stress, maybe older money stress, and now you have new money stress, and now you have, all these other fears and uncertainties. And that means our reactions are becoming hair trigger. So what I want to describe is that reaction, that hair trigger, irritability, and snipping, I want your community to understand that that's actually a normal and important reaction in our bodies, but we have to know how to outsmart it. That's because when we are in fight or flight, our biggest job, our brain and our body are coordinated in protecting us. So if our brain senses that we might be in danger, it sets off this coordinated pattern to protect ourselves from the perceived danger. And left to its own devices, our brain is going to see our partner or our loved ones as part of that perceived danger, just because we're in this heightened state of arousal. So what we have to do is calm ourselves down, because Betsy, I want to give you an example. It's really easy and clear to understand physical threats. So if I was a cave person and a saber-toothed tiger jumped in front of me, of course I want a coordinated marshaling of my defenses. I'm going to fight the saber-toothed tiger, or I'm going to run away from the saber-toothed tiger, or I might freeze and hope the saber-toothed tiger thinks I look like a rock or something like that. And when we're in fight or flight and we're trying to talk, the fight state is not going to be physical fight, although I should say, that there can be domestic violence, and please get help if that's the situation that you are in. But that aside, what communication looks like in fight or flight is snipping, just like you said, or criticism, or not being able to listen. Other things that happen, and the flight version of fight or flight in communication means avoiding talking, like I don't want to talk about this. And the freeze version is a shutting down, like maybe you're trying to talk to me and I'm just shut down. And a few other things, a few other things that happen in us is when we are in fight or flight, we don't have access, because we need to protect ourselves, we don't have access to empathy and compassion. Think about that. I can't have empathy for that hungry saber-toothed tiger. That is pretty much a death sentence to me. So our brains make it so that's not accessible to us. We don't have accessibility to creative problem solving. Our problem solving is super targeted to protection. We don't have access to our senses of humor. Again, you don't want to see the irony in the saber-toothed tiger showing up. because that takes away your brain resources, you're dead. And we don't have the ability to listen with openness and curiosity. So, so that's our really, really natural way of talking in fight or flight. So again, I want to let your community know that all these reactions are completely normal, but it doesn't mean we want to just let that happen.
Sure. So what are some things that we can do to kind of calm that down, or get our ideas and our emotions across in a more common way, so that we have more, I guess, a better output or reaction to our conversations?
Yes, great question, Betsy. So the first thing I'm gonna talk about three different kind of groups of tips. So the first thing, the first tip that I want to give, but I want to just expand a little bit more on what I was just saying. Fight or flight right now is being perpetuated by surprise and by being startled. So what I mean by that is that if you, or let's say I am, reading the news on my phone, and I say, "Oh my God, Betsy, did you see? What have I just done? I have just startled you. You weren't ready for me to say that. I don't know what you were thinking or doing. So if I am just doing my life and I just blurt out something, or if I'm thinking about something I want to talk to you about, and I'm like, oh my gosh, we need to," that is very startling. And this is the opposite of what we want. And right now we're being startled every time we listen to or look at anything. We're being startled. So the first set of tips that I want to give is preparing inside yourself for what you want to say. So number one, become aware that you want to say something, and put some kind of a filter or a gatekeeper in front of your mouth so that you don't just speak without thinking. And that's not really the normal way we're doing it. If we're in the house together and I want to say something, I just say it to you. Oh my gosh, did you see this? Or wow, look at that, or whatever it is. We're free and comfortable to just talk. But what I'm suggesting people do right now is become a little bit aware ahead of time. I want to say something. And now here's what you're going to do with that. First of all, don't say something just yet. The first question you want to ask yourself once you're aware that you want to say something is, what is the one topic or focus that I want to talk about? Don't set out to talk about like the entirety of how should we organize our entire response right now, but pick one thing that you'd like to talk about in the moment and get clear in your head, what is that? The second question to ask yourself is, how do I feel about this? And get clear with that. Am I worried? Am I scared? Am I hopeful? Am I confused? Whatever it is, get clear with how you're feeling. And so make a note of all the answers to these questions, because we're going to be using them in the second phase. So then the third question to ask yourself is, what is my clear request, or what is my goal in talking about this with the person I want to talk to? So what I mean, for example, one goal, like I was saying earlier, if I want to share with you something I saw in the news, I just might want to share it with you. I want to just read it to you. Or another goal might be, if I am feeling, concerned. I was just telling you before we started recording, Betsy, about my mother lives in New York City and is traveling out of the city. So I might want to share with you my fears or my concerns, but I might not want you to fix it or offer any solutions. So I have to get clear in my mind. Do I just want a nice ear to listen to my concerns? Or another example of what I might want is you and I might have a decision that we have to come to together, and we might have different opinions. So I might say, I want to hear each other's opinions and come to a decision. So you want to get clear. What do you want to have come out of the conversation that you want to have? Okay, so then the fourth thing, think about a time where you had a similar kind of conversation with this person that went well and felt good. So, for example, if I want to talk to you about my concerns about my mother, and you and I, Betsy, talked about something else last week, I might say, hey, Betsy, remember that time we were talking last week and you really listened to me. It really felt so supportive when you just let me talk and you heard me out and you didn't try to fix it. So that's what I'm thinking about that time. And then the fifth and final piece in this first set of questions to prepare yourself with is, when and where do you want to have this conversation so you're ready? And what I mean is, you want to try to think about, when do you have the time to talk where you're both going to have pretty good energy, so like not last thing before bed, and when do you have the time to not be interrupted, not be distracted? And where in your home is a good place, in your home or outside in your yard or something, is a good place that you usually feel calm and good and connected talking? So you don't want to pick a place where you usually are snipping at each other, but you want to pick that place where you often sit down and relax and talk together. So just to recap, if you know you want to say something, become aware of that. What is it that I want to say? Like, oh, I want to say something. What's the one thing I want to say? How do I feel about it? What do I want to come out of this conversation? What do I appreciate that was similar to this conversation with this person? And when and where might be a good place to have this conversation? So that's the first group of preparation tips. And I want to move on to the next, but any thoughts or questions before I move on?
No, it makes so much sense, because I start thinking about sometimes with my husband, especially with the kids around, a lot of times our conversations are like in passing in the hall. And now I'm just thinking, like, on a regular day-to-day basis, forget all this extra stress, that now I see why sometimes our conversations don't go as well as I planned, because I'm springing things on him as he's walking by, and then he gets defensive, and then I get defensive because he's gotten defensive. So I'm like, wow, these are skills that I can take out of this time too. So, but I see why now it's even more important to be setting these things up in today's day and age. Yeah.
Yeah, you are so right. And this is just normal. This is how we live. You said, I springing it on him when we're walking by. Yes, that's life. I'm thinking about something. Oh, there you are. Hey, we should, sell the car. What? Like, where did that come from? I wasn't ready.
Yeah.
So, it is totally helpful in real life, but now even more so, because we're just walking around, like I said, feeling that hypervigilance, that state of alert.
That's great.
Yeah. So then here's the next thing. So far, the 5 things that I talked about are what you are thinking through in your head. Now you're going to talk to the person you want to talk to about having a conversation. So here are my tips for that. So the first thing is getting the attention of the person that you want to speak to, and keeping in mind not surprising and not startling. You want to be, gentle and aware with how you get the other person's attention. So thing number one is, if my partner or my roommate is in the other room, don't say, "Hey, Betsy," or even worse, "We should sell the car." Like, no, you want to be in the same room with the person that you want to speak to. So if they're not in the room with you, get up, go find them, and look at them. What are they doing? If they're deep in thought or they're working hard or, something, that's probably not the moment to talk to them. So watch them, take a second. Do they notice you? Is there a break in what they're doing? And then I recommend that you start by just saying their name and seeing, if they acknowledge you. So if I say, "Hey, Betsy," I'm going to wait. If Betsy doesn't say anything, if you don't say anything, you're not ready for me to go on with what I want to talk about, well, with the next steps. So, let's try that again. If I say, "Hey, Betsy."
Yes.
There you go. So now if Betsy says yes, now I want to say, "Do you have a second?" If Betsy doesn't say yes, maybe you have your headphones on, I can go over and gently tap your arm. But whatever, I'm not going to launch into the next step until I get acknowledgement that you've heard me. So then I want to say, "Do you have a second?"
Sure.
Now, there we go. Now, sure might be a terrific answer, but I want to let everybody know that if someone comes up to you and say, "Do you have a second?" and you don't, here's a lovely way to say no. I like to start with saying yes before I say no. And what I mean by that is, Betsy, if you ask me if I have a second and I'm, in the middle of preparing for my next interview, I might say, "Hey, Betsy, I would love to talk to you, but I can't right now. Can we talk in 10 minutes? Can we talk in half an hour?" Something like that. So if I say, "Hey, Betsy," and you say yes, then I say, "Do you have a second?" If you say yes, here's what I recommend. So the first tip is get your person's attention in a nice way. The next thing you want to do, you were going to start with number 4 from before, which was that thing you appreciate. So I'm going to open it up with what I appreciate. "Hey, Betsy, remember last week when we were talking about that thing?" I can't think of an example. "And you were such a good listener. You really heard me. I felt so supported by you. I want to have a talk and have that kind of feeling again. And what I want to talk about is the topic, my one topic that was from before. I want to talk about my mother leaving New York because I'm really worried about it. And what I would like is," and now I'm going to tell you exactly what I want out of this conversation. I just want you to listen. I don't want any fixing or solutions, or "I need your help problem solving," or "I need," whatever it is, tell you what I need from this conversation. And then the 5th thing from before was the when and where. So I want to say, "So Betsy, when is a good time for the two of us to have this conversation? I'm thinking," I might suggest the time that I thought. "I'm thinking after dinner might be good when the kids are busy. Is that a good time for you?" And then we'll figure that out together. And then I'm thinking, where's a good place that we can sit and talk? I love it when we sit on the bench outside the front door. Would that work for you? And we'll negotiate that. Now we've picked our time and place. And so that is the whole second phase. So to recap, I get your attention and make sure you're ready to hear me. Then I give you my appreciation for you. I tell you what I want to talk about and how I'm feeling and my goal for the conversation. What do I want to have come out of this or have happen? And we come up with a time and place. So now I'm ready to move on to the next set of tips. That
Sure.
work?
Yeah. And
Okay.
I like before you go on to the next, I was actually thinking, this is great, not just with partners or roommates or whoever else is in the house, but right now my kids are homeschooled and they're driving me insane. I'm actually going to show them this interview afterwards because I find that this is something we're doing because we've never spent this much time together.
Oh my
And
gosh.
so they have a question and they're barging in and I can't get anything done. But I think if we all come up with this as a plan to communicate, this is going to make everything go so much more smoothly. So this really helps with any relationship that you're in. So
Absolutely. I've been recommending this in my couples therapy work for years. You want to talk to someone, go and look. Can they hear you? Get their attention. Ask
yeah.
permission to talk. Actually, yeah, I'll just include this in the next piece. But yeah, it's so helpful all the time. And yeah, so.
So what's the next part?
Well, the next part, one thing that I really want to say is ask permission. So remember, I was giving an example before. I'm looking through, the news and I want to say something, or whatever it is I want to say. Ask permission. Does the other person have bandwidth? So let's say I say to you, Betsy, I want to have this conversation with you. I'm really worried. Do you want to talk about this? You might say, you know what, Sarah, actually, I don't. I am actually so overwhelmed with my own worries. I don't feel like I could be a good listener for you right now. So don't take it for granted that the other person is all on board to talk just because you've asked about it in a really nice way. Or if you come home from a bad day and you want to complain, ask the other person, can I vent? Is that okay if I vent about what happened? I might not be able to handle it right now. I mean, as you've been saying, this is so helpful in general in life, but right now we are getting, our buckets are being filled to overflowing all day long, and we have to, settle down before we can hear another thing. So really make sure the other person is ready to hear you. So let's say you and I agree, yeah, let's talk after dinner. Here's what you're going to do. Before we are going to start talking, whenever that was, we're going to take a few minutes to each calm down and relax in our own way. So 5 or 10 minutes or 15 or 20 minutes, I'm going to go do my favorite kind of relaxation. You're going to do your favorite kind of relaxation. And Betsy, I'm assuming you've had experts on talking about relaxation, so maybe remind your community about where they can find those. But whatever settles you down, do that for a few minutes before we sit down together and start talking, so that our nervous systems are not at this heightened baseline, but that we're, more calm and relaxed just to start with. And now the next thing is we want to have a safe, controlled, not surprising, not startling, predictable conversation. And I'm going to recommend a pattern of speaking that's not the common pattern of speaking, I admit, but it ticks all the boxes for keeping things calm and steady and controlled and predictable. And that's just having a speaker-listener pattern of talking, where one person is the first speaker and the other person is the first listener. And the listener's job is just to listen well enough so they can really build understanding of the speaker. That's all. You're not going to listen with the intent to disagree or refute or argue or even agree or jump in with your own opinion. All you're going to do is listen with the goal of understanding the other person. So let's say you're worried about your mother and you say to me, Sarah, I'm really worried about my mother. She lives in New York and she's going to be going somewhere else. And I'm really worried about her. I want to say, wow, Betsy, I hear that you're worried about your mother, that she's going somewhere else. Yes. What I've observed time and time again is something just as simple as telling you what I heard you say. The relief and what do I want to say? Just the connection between the two of us is so strong. I just feel like, oh, you heard me. I didn't have to push. I didn't have to fight. I didn't have to convince. I didn't have to repeat myself. It's just such a way for us to connect and my nervous system to settle down and me to feel heard. So another thing that's very helpful about that is, excuse me a second. Another thing that's helpful about that is we can catch misunderstandings really quickly. So if you tell me this about your mother and I say, oh, you're really worried your mother's about to get sick, you might say, no, that's not on my mind. I'm worried my mother's going to go and meet with other people. Oh, okay. Because we just want to make sure, am I hearing what you think you're saying? And then at some point towards the end of the conversation, what I want to do, if I'm the listener, is validate what you're saying, which means if I was in your shoes, if I was seeing life through your eyes, I would feel that way too. It sure makes sense to me that you are having that feeling or that thought. So I might say, yeah, Betsy, if I was you and your mother was doing this, I'd be worried too. And again, just the relief that we feel, the connection that we feel, the settled downedness, that great feeling of being heard and understood usually just fills up the person. And then it's time for us to switch. And I say, okay, what's on your mind? Or, I'm losing track right now of who was the speaker and who was the listener, but then you just switch. And one final thing that I want to say is when we're talking about thoughts or feelings, especially about the person we're talking to, do not blame. Just be really neutral. So if you're worried about your partner coming in from the outdoors bringing germs, you don't want to blame or criticize like you are, putting us at risk. Instead, when you come in from the outside, I'm concerned that there are germs on you. That's a neutral way to talk about your concern that's not a blaming.
How do you deal with, obviously, like we're all listening to you now, and these are great tips, and they're tips that I'm going to take back, and I hope the listeners take back. But the other person we're talking to hasn't had the privilege of watching this podcast. How do you deal with, I guess, somebody that, doesn't follow these nice rules? Or even like when we started and you were talking about your mom, I think, oh my God, I was a terrible listener because right away I started thinking about my point of view and I was like, oh, and I'm like, oh, that could have not, made you feel good. And I'm like, wow. And I see that pattern when I'm talking to my family, that all of us are always very quick to jump in and give our opinions or our thoughts or whatever, instead of listening and validating. And it does end up a lot of times in miscommunication. So.
Well, so first of all, invite them to watch this themselves. But what you say is really important, and I didn't really include that in the preparation part. You can say, excuse me, you can say, for example, I want to talk about la, 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 and I was watching something about calm communication, and I really want the two of us to try something new. How about you? I was just learning about how, our nervous systems and whatever, and you can describe it in your own words. And I want to try this out. How about you? Or, you know, for those of us who have a lot of time on our hands, or even if we don't, have a family meeting and say, hey, you guys, I want us as a family to be even more careful with each other, even more kind and intentional. I was learning about this. Can I, and here again, you want to ask permission. Can I describe it to you? You know, are you open to hearing about this? Because I really want to give it a try. I think it would be really helpful. So absolutely, Betsy, what you bring up is so important. We can't just learn this all in our head and think, well, I learned this great thing and it's going to work and everyone's going to know what's happening. No. So definitely say, you know, this is how I want to have this kind of conversation. And even better, like I said, you before you even have a topic, you can call a family meeting in that pattern that I was talking about, you know, getting everyone's attention, et cetera. And then this can be the one topic of this meeting is I want to talk about how we can be, you know, mindful and careful as a family when we're communicating. So, you know, can we talk about that right now?
These are such very good tips. And I really think not only just for now, but once we get back to normal life again, is there anything specifically that you want to highlight or anything I haven't asked you so far that we didn't cover?
Well, for sure, what I want to highlight that I already said is not to startle and surprise each other. Whatever it is, you know, even if it's a joke, let's not startle and surprise each other right now. Just be aware that everyone you're living with, everyone you're coming into contact with is on a heightened state of alert right now. And we might, you know, walk around with a smile, but inside we may be filled to overflowing with our overwhelm. So everything that you can do to not surprise and startle each other, to be as controlled and predictable as possible will help each other. So, you know, what I outlined is a whole list of tips for how to do that. But I think just keeping that one guiding principle right in front of our minds, you know, like you said earlier, Betsy, just springing something on your husband as you're walking past him in the hall. Just that kind of moment, if we cannot do that, that'll just help us settle down so much more. So that's definitely the one thing that I want to highlight that I've already said.
Thank you. I really appreciate you being with us here today and going over these wonderful tips. Where can people find out more about you?
Well, my website right now is drsarahrattray.com. And I will be very shortly later today. I don't know when this will be airing, so very soon.
As soon as possible. I'm trying to get these ones out. Yeah.
There will be a page called Couples Communication Institute.com/questions, where you can put in questions that you would like me to create webinars or workshops about, or Facebook Lives or whatever, because I know there are so many concerns and questions. How do we get through this without killing each other?
Yes.
So you can go there to just let me know what you'd like to hear more of. And finally, Betsy, what I was sharing with you today is in a free PDF download guide for your community. And that right now can be found at drsarahrattray.com/calm talk. So that is available for your entire community. And it goes through step by step, pretty much everything that I was talking about today.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much once again. And I hope you stay well. And I hope your mom's doing well and the rest of your family. And I'll be talking to you sometime soon, hopefully.
Yes, yours as well, Betsy. Yeah, have me on anytime. Always happy to help, and take care.
Thank you.
Today's episode was brought to you by the Pelvic Floor Store, your source for personal health. You can find us at www.pelvicfloorstore.com. For more information on today's episode and women's wellness, please go to drbetsygreenleaf.com.